December 1950. North Korea. The number you've probably heard, 17,000 American troops surrounded by over 100,000 Chinese soldiers in the mountains above the Chosin Reservoir. The actual figure was closer to 30,000. But that's not the number the history books got wrong. Temperature, 40 below zero. And falling. They held that perimeter for 17 days. Then they fought their way out. It's called one of the great fighting retreats in American military history. It is, but there's a number they left out entirely. Something enormous. The official account ends at the Korean coast when the last Marines step onto transport ships and the harbor closes behind them. That's where most of the documentaries stop. What happened next? What was already happening on that dock? Almost never makes the cut, because waiting at Hungnam were 91,000 North Korean civilians. Men, women, children, elderly people who had nowhere left to go. The Army and State Department had already decided to leave them there. Go back 5 months. In September 1950, General Douglas MacArthur executes the Inchon landing, Yerubo Fordlon, an amphibious assault so risky his own staff put the odds against it at 5,000 to 1. It works. The North Korean army collapses. MacArthur pushes north toward the Chinese border at the Yalu River. Reporters ask when the troops will be home. His answer, Christmas. Home by Christmas. The advance north accelerated. In October, intelligence reports began arriving at MacArthur's Tokyo headquarters. Chinese forces were massing at the Yalu. MacArthur's intelligence chief, General Charles Willoughby, told him it was posturing. China wouldn't intervene directly. On October 25th, ROK troops captured the first confirmed Chinese prisoner of the war near Unsan, a regular army soldier, not a volunteer. The reports kept arriving. They were filed, minimized, and dismissed. MacArthur's headquarters didn't fail to detect what was coming. They chose not to see it. One commander wasn't convinced. General Oliver Prince Smith commanded the 1st Marine Division. He'd been advancing north slower than MacArthur's staff wanted. Much slower. They were furious, but Smith had studied the terrain. One road, mountains on both sides, more than 78 miles from the reservoir to the sea, no lateral routes, no fallback position. He spent the approach march stockpiling supplies at a place called Hagaru at the southern tip of the reservoir. His own officers thought he was being overly cautious. He was being correct. November 27, 1950. 10 p.m. 6 Chinese divisions launched coordinated attacks on Marine positions around the entire reservoir simultaneously. The temperature was minus 25. 2 divisions struck the Marines at Udimni from the west and north. On the east shore, the 81st Division hit the Army. The Marines didn't have a flank anymore. They had a shrinking circle. Smith's stockpiles at Hagaru were the difference between a fighting retreat and a massacre. East of the reservoir, the Army had a separate nightmare. Task Force MacLean, built around roughly 3,000 soldiers of the Army's 31st Regimental Combat Team, was hit by the same wave. They didn't have Marine air cover, they didn't have Smith's supply depots, they didn't have concentrated positions. By December 1st, Task Force MacLean had effectively ceased to exist as a fighting unit. Fewer than 1,000 men reached UN lines. Their final commander, Lieutenant Colonel Don Faith, was killed leading a counterattack. He was awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously. Most Americans have never heard his name. The cold fought for both sides and it didn't care. Rifles jammed. Morphine syrettes froze solid. Corpsmen warmed them under their tongues before injecting wounded men. Vehicle engines had to run through the night or they wouldn't start at dawn. Plasma crystallized in the bags. Men slept in full gear and woke unable to bend their fingers. The Chinese suffered too. Some of their units ran out of food within 3 days. Some froze to death in their attack positions. The Marines had one thing the Chinese didn't: air. F-4. U-Corsairs flying from carriers offshore and from Yonpo Airfield flew continuous close air support around the perimeter, sometimes dropping ordnance danger close, within 50 yards of friendly lines. Pilots developed low-angle runs along the ridge lines to tighten their accuracy in mountain terrain. When the weather closed and the planes couldn't fly, the perimeter contracted. When the weather cleared, it held. December 6th, Smith ordered the breakout south toward the port of Hungnam. Roughly 78 miles of mountain road, single lane, under fire the entire way. The Marines brought their dead, they brought their wounded, they brought their equipment. Every man who could be moved was moved. When a reporter asked Smith if this was a retreat, Smith told correspondents, "We are not retreating. We are merely advancing in another direction." On December 11th, the last Marine unit cleared the perimeter. The road to Hungnam was open, and this is where the official story ends. This is where the real one starts. When the Marine and Army columns reached Hungnam, they found 91,000 North Korean civilians, families, elderly, children, who'd followed the retreating United Nations forces south. They were North Koreans who'd cooperated with the UN occupation. If the communist government returned, and it was returning, they would be marked. They were asking to be taken. They had nowhere else to go. The Army and State Department looked at the situation and reached a conclusion. The ships were needed for troops and equipment. The evacuation window was closing. Chinese forces were pushing toward the port. Nobody had planned for this. The official recommendation was to complete the military evacuation and leave the civilians behind. There were real logistical arguments for it. The argument didn't hold for one man. The SS Meredith Victory was a cargo ship, a Victory-type cargo ship. Its holds were empty metal rooms, no bunks, no seats, no heat, no sanitation. It was built for freight. Its total complement, crew and passengers combined, was 47. On December 22, 1950, its captain, Leonard LaRue, walked to the Port Authority and said he was loading civilians. Then he opened the cargo holds. He didn't call headquarters. He didn't wait for permission. He just loaded them. He loaded nearly 14,000 people onto a cargo ship designed for 12. They filled every hold, every deck. The ship rode low in the water. LaRue had no precise count when he ordered the lines cast off. He tallied them when the ship was at sea, 14,005. The crossing took 3 days. No doctors, no adequate food, no facilities for 14,000 people in open cargo holds in December. 5 babies were born during the voyage. All 5 survived. When LaRue's ship reached Geoje Island on December 25, 1950, Christmas Day, disembarkation began immediately. Every one of the 14,000 people who'd boarded at Hungnam was alive. Not one casualty on the crossing. Guinness World Records would later recognize it as the largest evacuation from land by a single ship in history. LaRue gave one interview about it. He said he'd been asked to do a job, and he did it. In 1954, he entered a Benedictine monastery in Newton, New Jersey, and took the name Brother Marinus. He spent the rest of his life there. He died in October 2001. The last time most people had ever heard of him, he was loading 14,000 strangers onto a cargo ship in a Korean harbor in the dark. MacArthur was relieved of command 4 months later. President Truman fired him in April 1951, not for the intelligence failure that led to Chosin, but for publicly contradicting presidential war policy. Willoughby was never formally reprimanded. He eased into retirement that same year. There was no formal accountability for what happened at the Yalu. The official story had a hero. It was less clear on the villain. The official story of Chosin is true. The Marines and soldiers who held that perimeter and walked that road deserve every word of the reputation history gave them. But 17,000 isn't the whole number. 91,000 are part of this story too. So is the intelligence that was ignored. So is the general who slowed down and saved his division. So is the captain who didn't wait for permission. Every war has an official story. This isn't that. And now you know.